Last year, about 4 days into a 2-week state of mild and annoying burnout, I watched this film called I Lost My Body. I was very done bored with animation at this time because nothing that caught my interest was being released in the mediums I consumed it in, and moreover, animation was the cause of my burnout anyway. I was trying to learn some 2D animation and I was really not nailing it. This is around the time when I watched I Lost My Body and I realized I really liked it. I didn't know exactly what I liked about this movie until last week, when for the second time in my life, I was explicitly shot in the face with why I am so obsessed with the medium of animation. In 2018, I saw the trailer to Into the Spiderverse. And seeing as I didn't have a particular reason to go watch it in theaters, I decided to wait till the movie dropped into digital release, and then I immediately regretted it. I should have really watched that in theaters. I loved Into the Spider-Verse. Watching it alone, I didn't realize then what had captured me so drastically about how that story took Spider-Man and made it feel like it wasn't even that. Into the Spider-Verse was the first time I watched a Western animation and felt as if it had tried something wildly different. But in 2018, things were different. And although it was an amazing film, I stopped thinking about it beyond the fact that it was an amazing film and a stunning example of visual stylization. Okay, before we go any further with this, I need to come clean about something. I am a massive weeb, if you didn't notice, and an absolute stickler for 2D animation. With that said, after that 2 weeks of burnout I mentioned earlier, after I lost my body, I watched a ton of Western films and realized that there was in fact a wildly creative mess of styles in obscure corners of Western animation, and I was merely just ignoring it. So I started going through everything I missed. To be honest, last year was pretty good for animation. I watched Arcane, I watched Mitchells vs. the Machines, and a couple dozen student films from the same sources that had brought I Lost My Body into my attention. Although, as I binged these animations with an almost equal respect for both the new blood flowing through Western animation and religiously indulging in my original allegiance to Eastern anime, I was happy. I had a very interesting feeling up inside of me that, for the life of me, I couldn't put into a proper sentence. Well, until last week. This was one of the only movies I waited days in advance to get a ticket on opening day. I watched the first screening they had in my country. As you've probably heard by now, it's literally the only thing people have talked about for the entirety of last week. Across the Spider-Verse was a phenomenon. While the movie uses a lot of elements that were present in the first film, it does something that is truly insane with how far they're willing to push what animation as a medium is. And I don't mean it in the same way that other studios do. Being in the anime community, I have this experience a lot. And every season, when one anime or another pushes the boundaries of what people thought were conventional the last season. While Demon Slayer floors everyone with its incorporation of 3D in animation, then Mob Psycho and Chainsaw Man pushed the limit of what was traditionally accepted as the quality of a weekly series. I hadn't felt this way, like the way I felt about Spider-Verse, from any of those. See, I have this theory. When we look into history and all the phases of art and expression, it's pretty evident that a lot of that had distinct changing points. For example, when art went from modernism to postmodernism, and while it's generally easier to see the difference in something like this in things like architecture, it may be difficult unless you actually pay a lot of attention to see these differences in mediums like film, especially in 3D animation, where the creation of most shows have become so formulaic that you can't even tell what company made what film or what studio made what film. among the saturation of very, very, very similar animation, what Spider-Verse made me feel, at least what it tried to do, was bring forth a new generation of animation entirely. It almost feels like someone was given too much freedom, and that is something worthy of celebration. You see, I'm an artist. Well, I at least think so. I'm a pretty shitty one currently, but I've always dreamed of being behind the scenes, being behind the computers of these amazing milestones of animation. I would have loved to work on a cool film, and I still do. These days, when I look at anything, movies, games, animation, and literally any creative mediums at all I hear is about how rushed it looked, and like how everything was done before schedule or ahead of schedule, because companies that own these licenses to these titles are greedy and need to beat a creative cash cow to an inch within her life. And it literally is refreshing to see something like Spider-Verse that didn't feel like that. But about what I said earlier, Across the Spider-Verse felt a lot like someone was given way too much freedom and literally no restrictions. At least that's what I thought initially. But looking into it, I realized the guy who was hired to make the art style for these films was fired way before the first film, Into the Spider-Verse, was even released. So it probably isn't as free of corporate influence as I had assumed. But then I realized the feeling I had when I first watched all of these indie films last year, what I felt when I watched I Lost My Body, this was that exact feeling, but much like Miles, it was all dialed up to 11. Across the Spider-Verse is a masterpiece of film, and it's not because they were allowed to do these things free of resistance. Most movies don't experiment because there is no time for them to do that. This is why every Pixar film looks like every DreamWorks film, and why every Disney animation looks like every other Disney animation. Those films are made by professionals whose job it is to make films. But Across the Spider-Verse is very different. The ability it has to pull an art student out of an art block, the ability it has to inspire, comes from what I can only describe as someone just gave a set of student filmmakers to just make a feature film. Obviously, that's not what happened. They did have to fight for this art style, but they did it in their own way. Spider-Punk was animated in threes, and it took them years to master that process. There's a live-action character just casually chilling in the middle of an animated film. The 20-second Lego scene was done by a 14-year-old who got noticed because of a fan animation, and while all those people are skilled and amazingly coherent in their work together, the art, the workflows, the music, the cluster bomb of raw passion projected in Spider-Verse feels duct taped together, like an artist who forgets to erase their pencil lines. After all these smooth corners and rounded edges and simplified logos and everything that is so overdone these days, why Spider-Verse matters is because it creates a whole new movement of animation. One where the medium isn't what separates films. So it isn't live action or 2D animation or 3D animation. Every conceivable story can be told in every conceivable way possible. And some will hit and some will miss. It won't be perfect. Just like anyone can be Spider-Man, anyone can make animation. It's just how much you want to do that matters. This is the postmodern of animation. Spider-Verse kicked it all, and people should really start making stuff. God, I can't wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse.